The coffee shop smelled of cinnamon and desperation. Mine, mostly. 3 job rejections in 1 week had a way of making even the most optimistic person question their life choices. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and adjusted my glasses, scanning the room for an empty table. The place buzzed with the typical morning crowd. Business people tapping frantically on laptops, college students highlighting textbooks, and the occasional tourist studying maps of Boston. I spotted a small table in the corner and made my way through the maze of chairs, clutching my mocha like it was the last life raft on a sinking ship. The coffee was overpriced, but I'd splurged anyway. Small comforts were all I had these days. As I settled into my seat, the bell above the door chimed. The casual hum of conversation dimmed immediately. It was subtle, like someone had turned down the volume knob on the room, but unmistakable. My eyes followed everyone else's to the entrance. A young man walked in, tall, perhaps 25, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, and striking blue eyes that contrasted with his olive skin. He wore a tailored black coat over a gray sweater, expensive but understated. Behind him, a much larger man in a dark suit entered, scanning the room with calculating eyes. The bodyguard's presence seemed to fill the space, making the coffee shop feel suddenly smaller. I watched as people averted their gazes, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The young man didn't seem to notice, or perhaps he was used to it. He moved with quiet confidence to the counter, where the barista's smile looked plastered on, her hands trembling slightly as she took his order. It wasn't hard to guess who he was. Everyone in Boston knew about the Moretti family. Their name was whispered in corners, their businesses scattered throughout the city like chess pieces on a board they controlled. Vincent Moretti had been running the family's enterprises for over 20 years. I'd seen his picture in newspapers, always accompanying articles about suspected criminal activities that somehow never resulted in convictions. This must be his son. I'd heard rumors, of course. The deaf son of the most feared man in Boston. A curiosity that people discussed in hushed tones. I watched as he pointed to something on the menu board. The barista nodded nervously, her eyes darting to the bodyguard and back. When she asked him a question, he didn't respond, and the awkwardness thickened in the air. She repeated herself louder, as if volume was the issue. The young man touched his ear and shook his head slightly. The barista's face flushed with embarrassment, as she fumbled with a notepad for him to write on. Something in me shifted. I knew that feeling of isolation, of being misunderstood, though certainly not for the same reasons. 3 years of working with deaf children at my previous school in Chicago had taught me many things. But most importantly, it had taught me that communication barriers were more about the unwillingness to find alternative paths than actual inability. Before I could question my impulse, I stood up and walked to the counter. The bodyguard's eyes locked onto me immediately, his hand shifting slightly toward his jacket. I swallowed hard but kept moving. "Excuse me," I said, then turned to the young man and signed. "Would you like some help ordering?" The surprise that flickered across his face was instant. His blue eyes widened, studying me with sudden intensity. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "You know ASL." His hands moved fluidly, with what I recognized as a slight Boston accent in his signing. "Yes," I replied. "I used to teach deaf children. I'm Emma." "Marco," he signed back, "and yes, I would appreciate the help. She doesn't understand what I want." I turned to the barista, who was watching our exchange with evident relief. "He'd like a double espresso, no sugar, and one of those chocolate croissants," I explained, signing simultaneously so Marco could follow. "Oh, thank God," she muttered. I had no idea what he was trying to order. I felt a flash of irritation. "Maybe the coffee shop could benefit from basic sign language training for staff," I suggested, keeping my voice light but pointed. The barista had the grace to look embarrassed as she rang up the order. I glanced back at Marco, who was watching me with undisguised interest. "Thank you," he signed. "Not many people in Boston know ASL." "Happy to help," I replied, suddenly aware of the bodyguard's unwavering stare. I should get back to my table. "Wait," Marco signed quickly. "Would you join me? It's rare to find someone I can actually talk to." The request caught me off guard. Warning bells rang in my head. This wasn't just any person asking to share a table. This was a Moretti. The implications made my stomach tighten. But something in his expression, a mixture of hope and resignation, as if he expected rejection, made my decision for me. Sure, I signed. Let me grab my things. As I turned to collect my belongings, I caught sight of several patrons watching our interaction with poorly concealed curiosity. Some quickly looked away when they noticed my gaze. Others whispered behind cupped hands. I straightened my shoulders and walked back to Marco, who was now receiving his order. We settled at a table by the window, the morning light casting patterns across the wooden surface. The bodyguard positioned himself at a nearby table, close enough to intervene if necessary, but giving us a semblance of privacy. "So, Emma," Marco signed after taking a sip of his espresso. "What brings you to Lucia's at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday looking like the world is ending?" I laughed, surprised by his directness. "Is it that obvious?" He shrugged, his eyes crinkling slightly at the corners. "I'm good at reading people. Even without hearing, I notice things others don't. Job hunting," I admitted. "I moved to Boston 3 weeks ago for a teaching position, but the school lost its funding for the special education program. Now I'm scrambling for alternatives." "What do you teach?" "I specialize in education for deaf and hard-of-hearing children. I worked at a school in Chicago for 3 years. Interest sparked in his eyes. "Why Boston?" I hesitated, unsure how much to share with this stranger. But there was something disarming about him that made the truth slip out easily. "My mother got sick. Cancer. She's in treatment here, and I wanted to be close to her." I left out the part about the bitter divorce that had left her alone, about the mounting medical bills, about the nights I spent worrying if I'd made a massive mistake moving here. Marco nodded, his expression softening. "I'm sorry. Family is everything." The way he said it, with such conviction, reminded me who I was talking to. To the Morettis, family truly was everything. From what the newspapers reported, their loyalty to each other was legendary, as was their vengeance against those who betrayed them. "What about you?" I asked, eager to shift the conversation. "What do you do?" A shadow crossed his face. "I work for my father." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. The implications hung between us like an invisible curtain. "How did you become fluent in ASL?" he asked instead. "My cousin was born deaf. We grew up together, and I learned alongside her. It felt natural to pursue it professionally." I took a sip of my cooling mocha. "When did you lose your hearing?" "I was born with partial hearing," he explained, his signs measured and precise. "A fever when I was 4 took the rest. My father hired the best teachers, but..." He glanced around the coffee shop. "Most people don't bother to learn how to communicate with me. They talk to Anthony instead." He nodded toward the bodyguard. The sadness underlying his matter-of-fact statement tugged at something in my chest. I recognized the isolation he described, though I imagined it was compounded by who his family was. People already feared the Morettis. The communication barrier gave them another reason to keep their distance. "Their loss," I signed, then immediately felt foolish for the platitude. But Marco smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face, making him look younger and more approachable. "You're different." The intensity of his gaze made heat rise to my cheeks. I looked down at my coffee, suddenly aware of the dangerous territory I was entering. This casual conversation felt significant in ways I couldn't quite articulate. The bodyguard, Anthony, shifted in his seat, checking his watch. He made a subtle gesture to Marco, who nodded. "I have to go," Marco signed, disappointment evident in his expression. "Business meetings, the bane of my existence." I nodded, ignoring the strange twinge of regret I felt. This was for the best. One pleasant conversation with Marco Moretti was already one more than was prudent. He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek business card holder. He withdrew a card and placed it on the table between us. "If you're looking for a job, my family's foundation runs a school for deaf children in the North End. They're always looking for qualified teachers." His fingers lingered on the card. No pressure. Just an option. I stared at the card. Moretti Family Foundation was embossed in elegant script, with an address and phone number beneath. My throat tightened. A job. Exactly what I needed. But working for the Morettis, thank you. I signed, taking the card carefully. "I'll think about it." Marco stood, buttoning his coat. Anthony was already at attention, scanning the room with practiced vigilance. "It was nice meeting you, Emma," Marco signed. "Maybe I'll see you again." "Maybe," I replied. knowing I should hope otherwise. As they left, conversation in the coffee shop gradually returned to its normal volume. I sat alone, turning the business card over in my fingers, feeling the weight of it beyond its physical presence. A simple piece of paper that represented a choice, one that could change everything. I slipped the card into my wallet, telling myself I was just keeping my options open. But as I gathered my things to leave, I couldn't shake the memory of Marco's smile, or the connection that had sparked between us in those brief moments. A connection built on something as simple as being seen and heard, in a world that often overlooked us both for different reasons. Outside, the autumn air was crisp against my skin. Fallen leaves crunched beneath my boots as I walked toward the subway station. Boston was still unfamiliar territory, a maze of historic streets and modern buildings that I hadn't quite figured out how to navigate. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice the black SUV idling at the curb until I was almost past it. The window rolled down smoothly, revealing Marco's face. He motioned for me to wait. My feet froze to the sidewalk as Anthony emerged from the driver's side and opened the back door. Marco stepped out, his movements graceful despite the suddenness of his appearance. "Sorry," he signed. "I forgot to ask something important." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What's that?" "Your phone number," he signed, a hint of mischief in his eyes, "in case you have questions about the school." "Oh," I said aloud, forgetting to sign in my surprise. I quickly corrected myself, of course, for professional reasons. His smile widened, telling me he saw right through my pretense. Nevertheless, he pulled out his phone and handed it to me. I typed my number with trembling fingers, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. When I handed the phone back, our fingers brushed. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through me, and I quickly withdrew my hand. "Thank you, Emma," he signed. "I'll be in touch." As the SUV pulled away, I stood rooted to the spot, watching until it disappeared around a corner. Only then did I release the breath I'd been holding. I had just given my phone number to the son of Boston's most notorious crime boss. And worse, much worse. I was looking forward to hearing from him. What had I gotten myself into? That night, I lay awake in my tiny apartment, staring at water stains on the ceiling while my mind replayed the morning's encounter. The business card sat on my nightstand, its presence almost accusatory in the dim glow of streetlights filtering through thin curtains. I'd checked out the Moretti Family Foundation online. It was legitimate. A well-funded school for deaf children, praised for its innovative programs and impressive results. The kind of place I'd dreamed of teaching at. But the source of that funding, I turned over, burying my face in my pillow. Working there would mean being connected to the Moretti family, to Marco. The thought brought both thrill and dread in equal measure. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, making me jump. An unknown number. My pulse quickened as I opened the message. "It's Marco. Did you consider the school?" "No pressure, just curious." I sat up, clutching the phone. How did a simple text feel so weighted? I typed and deleted several responses before settling on. "Still thinking about it. It looks impressive." The reply came quickly. "Come see it tomorrow. I can show you around. 10 a.m. My finger hovered over the screen. The practical part of me knew I needed a job. My savings were dwindling fast, and my mother's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves. The cautious part reminded me who the Morettis were, what they were capable of. But another part? A part I was trying desperately to ignore. Remembered the way Marco's eyes had lit up when I signed to him, how genuine he'd seemed. "Okay," I typed back. "Text me the address." Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night. The following morning, I dressed with particular care, professional, but not stuffy. Dark jeans, a cream blouse, and a navy blazer. My hair twisted into a neat bun. I wanted to look like someone who belonged at a prestigious school, not someone desperate for employment. The Moretti Family School for the Deaf was housed in a beautifully renovated historic building in Boston's North End. Red brick and large windows, with a small courtyard where children played during what appeared to be a morning break. It looked nothing like what I'd imagined a mob-funded institution would be. It looked perfect. As I approached the wrought iron gates, I spotted Marco waiting at the entrance. He wore a light gray suit that accentuated his lean frame, his dark hair styled away from his face. He noticed me immediately, his expression brightening, Behind him stood Anthony, as ever. His watchful presence a stark reminder of who Marco was. "You came?" Marco signed when I reached him, a hint of surprise in his movements. "I said I would," I replied, trying to keep my signs casual despite my nerves. "Many people say things they don't mean," he signed, and there was a flash of something vulnerable in his eyes before his expression returned to polite interest. "Ready for the tour?" I nodded, and he led me through the gates. Children ranging from preschool to early teens moved around the grounds, some signing animatedly, others using a mix of sign and speech. They glanced curiously at me, but seemed completely comfortable with Marco's presence. A few even waved enthusiastically at him, and he returned their greetings with obvious affection. "They know you well," I observed. "I visit often," he signed. "It's important to me." We entered the building, where the halls were lined with colorful artwork. Marco guided me through classrooms equipped with the latest technology, a library with an extensive collection of resources for deaf education and specialized rooms for speech therapy and auditory training. Everything was state-of-the-art, better than any school I'd ever worked in. In one classroom, a teacher was instructing teenage students in advanced mathematics. When she spotted Marco, she smiled broadly and signed a greeting. Marco introduced me, explaining that I was considering joining the staff. "We desperately need someone for the elementary group," she signed. Our last teacher left for family reasons. "What age group?" I asked, professional interest overtaking my reservations. 7 to 9-year-olds, she replied. "Bright kids, but they need someone who really understands deaf education." "Are you certified?" "Yes, with a specialization in literacy development for deaf children," I signed, unable to keep the pride from my movements. Her eyes lit up. "Perfect. When can you start?" Marco laughed silently, his shoulders shaking. "Let her see the rest of the school first, Diane." As we continued the tour, I found myself increasingly impressed and confused. Everything about the school was legitimate, focused genuinely on providing quality education. The teachers were passionate, the facilities exceptional. It was difficult to reconcile with what I knew about the family behind it. We ended in a small garden at the back of the building, a peaceful space with benches and flowering plants. Anthony positioned himself near the door, giving us the illusion of privacy. "What do you think?" Marco asked, studying my face. "It's amazing," I admitted. "Better than anywhere I've taught before." He smiled, satisfaction evident in his expression. "The position is yours if you want it." I hesitated, the question burning inside me until I couldn't contain it any longer. "Why does your family run this school?" His expression sobered. "My father started it after I lost my hearing. He wanted a place where deaf children could get the education they deserved without the barriers I faced." His hands moved with careful precision. "Not everything my family does is what you read in newspapers." I knew I should leave it there, accept the explanation, and make my decision. But something pushed me further. "But the money that funds it," Marco's jaw tightened, a flash of hardness crossing his features, "comes from various Moretti businesses, all legitimate on paper." He studied me. "Does that bother you?" "It should. It absolutely should." Yet standing there, seeing what that money had created, a haven for children who might otherwise be overlooked, made everything less clear-cut. "I need to think about it," I signed honestly. He nodded, respecting my hesitation. "Of course. The school director's number is on the card I gave you. Call her when you decide." We walked back toward the entrance in silence. Children were returning to their classrooms, their animated signing creating a visual symphony around us. One little girl with pigtails ran up to Marco, tugging on his suit jacket. He crouched down immediately, his face softening as he signed with her. Their interaction was so natural, so genuine, that it made my chest ache. At the gate, Marco turned to me. "Whatever you decide about the job, would you have dinner with me tonight?" The invitation caught me off guard. "Dinner?" "Just dinner," he clarified. "I enjoy talking with you." His signs carried a sincerity that was difficult to doubt. Every rational thought in my head screamed caution. Getting involved with Marco Moretti on any level beyond professional was dangerous territory. Yet I found myself nodding. "Just dinner," I agreed. His smile was worth the risk, or at least that's what I told